This is Truth Be Told.
That not only are there reptilians here,
new evidence of UFO fleets.
We were close to nuclear war.
To help you transform so that you can live your highest truth.
We're not being told just because we're not ready for it.
Radio stations of frequency, vibrational.
I was a homicide detective with LAPD.
UFOs increase visitations. Did you know the Columbia River Gorge in Washington State is a world-class paranormal adventure destination? It sounds like a resort. Today we're going to talk with James Szubski, who is a renowned researcher and enthusiast when it comes to the fascinating topic of UFOs. James is a former volunteer search and rescue EMT, a wildland firefighter, a mountain guide, and we are going to discuss today a wide array of paranormal activities in the Columbia River Gorge. It includes Sasquatch, UFOs, portals, and small humanoids. And he is the Chief Operating Officer of Margie's Outdoor Store, which has initiated a paranormal reporting program which is now received well over 100 reports of strange activity in the gorge area. I love to explore, and today is one of those days. Get your questions ready. I'm Tony Sweet with Truth Be Told. Please welcome to the Truth Be Told studios for the first time, researcher James Szubski. Hey James, how are you?
I'm doing great. Thank you for having me on, Tony.
I'm excited. I am excited. It's not always to get a topic that I have not discussed on Truth Be Told after almost 800 and some episodes. So it's exciting for me. So to have you here.
I'm glad to be here.
So first of all, tell us about this gorge, the Columbia River Gorge. I don't know much about it. I know the Royal Gorge and, in Colorado and a lot of other gorges, but I've not heard of this one. So first of all, tell us maybe a little bit of history about it, and then we can pop into how the paranormal side of it ties into it.
Great. Yeah. So the Columbia River Gorge is in the Pacific Northwest. It forms the Columbia River forms the boundary between Washington State and Oregon State. And the gorge itself is 80 miles long, and it is the only sea level passage through the Cascade Mountains. And it is jaw-droppingly beautiful.
Wow.
Here in the gorge, we have over 90 named waterfalls on the Oregon side alone. Some of them are over 600 feet tall. We've got on the western side of the mountains, Pacific Northwest rainforest. On the eastern side of the mountains, there's a high plains desert. And in terms of adventure and neat stuff to explore, you really couldn't find a cooler place. I run a store, Margie's Outdoor Store, and it is approximately a 60-minute drive from Portland. So Portland is west of us. And so the gorge itself is geologically very, very unique. About 15 million years ago, an enormous fissure opened in the earth at the Washington-Idaho border east of us, and trillions and trillions of gallons of lava, mafic lava, started spewing out of it. And that lava was so voluminous that it ran 300 miles through the ancient, gentle Columbia River Valley and all the way to the Pacific Ocean. And if you took all of the lava that came out of this fissure and distributed it across the United States, it would bury the entire lower 48 states in 60 feet of lava.
Oh my gosh. Wow.
Yeah. And what's even more interesting about it, and maybe one of the reasons why we have so much paranormal activity here, is that so these eruptions happened over a period of time, and they estimate there were over 300 lava flows. And so what happened is it would flow and then it would cool and harden, flow and cool and harden. So we've got this astonishing, the walls of the gorge are like a layer cake of rock. It's that basalt rock that forms the hexagonal columns like you see in, I think, the Giant's Causeway in England.
Right.
Well, so these eruptive events were separated sometimes by over 100,000 years. And each time that lava flowed, the magnetic material in it oriented itself towards the Earth's North Pole at that time, the magnetic north, and then locked in place. And as you know, the magnetic North Pole wanders. In the last 100 years, it's wandered over 700 miles. And so over the course of 100,000 years, it wanders even more. And so the next flow would come, and its magnetic material would orient to the new magnetic north and lock in place. So we've got this layer cake of all these different strata of rock, and each of them has a unique magnetic signature. Yeah, you're showing a picture of the Columbia River flood basins, Columbia River flood basalts. So it is a massive
That's
flow,
huge.
but what it has done is created an extremely complicated electromagnetic environment. And one of the leading theories is that because of that and a few other things, we've got this very unique electromagnetic environment, and this is why so many people are having experiences here.
I mean, that would definitely make sense why, as we're going to touch on, I think, after a while, about the portals and other things, how with this electromagnetic energy, plus, these open doors to the center of the earth is pretty much right down the road. That's pretty amazing.
Yeah.
And
well,
and a lot of people live right on top of this stuff and don't know it. That's what's interesting to me, to know the history of where they live.
Well, so you have that sort of base layer of all those different magnetic signatures. And then about 2 million years ago, the Cascade Mountains started rising up. And within 50 miles of the store, we have got 3 stratovolcanoes that are over 10,000 feet tall. And what that did was it started to bend those layers into unique angles, right? And so we've got Mount St. Helens, which famously erupted in the 1980s, Mount Adams, which is a huge UFO hotspot. I don't know if you've ever heard of Isetti Ranch. That's a place just south of Mount Adams. Stands for enlightened contact with extraterrestrial intelligence. And the thing about that is that James Gilliland has been inviting people out to his property for decades, and they sit out there and they watch UFOs fly around Mount Adams all night. And then to the south, we've got Mount Hood, which is famously a big Sasquatch hotspot. So that geology again is really creating a unique environment here. And then you add on to that, 15,000 years ago, we had those great Missoula floods. And so some of your audience may be familiar with the work of Graham Hancock. Randall Carlson talks about it. Basically, during the end of the Ice Age, this huge lake formed in Montana. An ice dam broke and flooded across eastern Washington state. They estimate that it was as much water as all of the rivers on Earth combined, times 10. And so that flooded into eastern Washington, as you're showing on the map that's up on the screen. It got backed up at a place called Wallula Gap, which is the sort of eastern gateway to the gorge. And then it rocketed down the gorge and eventually made its way to the ocean. Well, at parts of the gorge, that water was 1,000 feet deep, running at 60 to 70 miles an hour. And it was filled with icebergs and boulders and trees and everything else. And it just scoured the land, and all of the topsoil was removed. And so all of those magnetically different layers were then exposed. And so, again, this is an incredibly geologically unique place. And, in the intro, you had said that we've received over 100 reports. That information is a little dated. We started this program maybe not quite 2 years ago, and we've had over 250 reports in that time.
Are these mostly local people, or is it maybe people even from just visiting?
The vast majority of them are local, but we do get a lot of folks. The gorge, being as beautiful as it is and a sort of an adventure destination, kind of a place, does see a lot of tourists.
Right.
And quite a few of them will file reports in the store.
I want to go back a little bit. I mean, we're talking about a lot about millions of years ago, and which is great because I think it's shapes us for what's going on now. But maybe 2,000 years ago, 3,000 years, 5,000 years ago, the native tribes that were from the area, we talk a lot about petroglyphs, old we call them wives' tales, but it's native ancestral wisdom that they passed on through generations of talking about sky people or Sasquatch. Have you talked to native tribes that maybe still exist in that area about their ancestors talking about what were the paranormal activity?
There is still a very strong Native American community here, and
what's the tribes?
But there are a number of tribes. The one that were closest to my store are the Klickitat tribe, and or I should, I guess, call them the Klickitat Nation. And these were the people that Lewis and Clark encountered when they came through here in 1806. And so there is still a great amount of evidence of some of their supernatural beliefs. There's an area, it's maybe 20 minutes east of the store, called Horse Thief Butte. And Horse Thief Butte is sort of like a desert mesa, steep sides, flat top. But you get up into it, and it is riddled with a labyrinth of hidden passageways and amphitheaters. There are petroglyphs on the walls. And there's evidence that they went on vision quests there. So they would build sort of these circular rock nests, and kids as young as 10 or 12 would go on vision quests. But this is now a state park, and it's associated with Horse Thief Lake. And right near Horse Thief Lake is a whole series of petroglyphs. Some of them are really quite impressive. They are shrouded in mystery. No one really knows what they mean. One of the most interesting stories about the origins of some of these petroglyphs is that they were created by diminutive people, perfectly formed humans that were no more than 18 to 24 inches tall, who wore clothing woven from rabbit fur.
Wow.
And, some of the legends that I've read said that these were the people who created this rock art.
That is amazing. I know I've never, it's funny, like I said, I've not heard about this, and now I definitely am going to have to take a trip up there. I know around Albuquerque, New Mexico, they have these beautiful petroglyphs that it's a park there. I'm trying to pull some pictures, but for the people that are watching, if you're listening to the audio, please go to our YouTube channel. This is some of the petroglyphs that, for me, it looks kind of a cattish, a cat, but it also looks like a demonic cat. So I'm not for sure what these are. Have you done any research on the history of what the petroglyphs are?
Yeah, and you could go on tours. I've spent a lot of time examining them. There's a few museums in the area that have them as well, and they draw even the Native Americans who are alive today don't know what they mean.
Wow.
And they have interpretations of them. Now, that cat is a very interesting image. So of course we have Native American stories of Sasquatch out here, Native American stories of creatures that lived in the sky. But this that cat image that you showed is actually at Horse Thief Lake. It is right there. And we have had over 80 reports of an enormous Black Panther creature.
Ah, there we go.
And we call it the Klickitat Ape Cat because in a few of the reports that we've received, it actually reportedly has a face that looks like a monkey. So it's an enormous black cat, long black fur, long black tail, very muscular. And like I said, we've had 80 reports of this creature. About half of those reports say that it is enormous in size. So between 4 to 5 feet tall at the shoulder. That's bigger than the largest cat alive, the tiger. And there's only one cat in the fossil record that matches that, and that is a Ice Age American lion known as the Panthera atrox. Very well documented in the fossil record, definitely lived here in Washington State. But this is a cat that weighed over 1,000 pounds and actually had the largest brain cavity of any cat that ever existed. And that's the only thing that sort of matches that size. So like I said, we've had 80 reports, about 40 of them describe this enormous size. Some people will say things like, well, I saw it leap across the road when I was driving, and from back paws to front paws, it stretched from the white line to the yellow line to the white line.
Right.
We've had other people that have had really close encounters with it, and they report this enormous size. And there's just a handful of folks, maybe 6 or 7 out of the 80, who describe this monkey-like countenance. In fact, the very first report that I'd ever received about this creature, the guy described it as having, this, it looked like a cross between a monkey and a big cat. He said it had intelligent ape-like eyes and a number of other primate features. And so, again, I'm receiving these reports, and I'm, trying to remain as objective as possible.
I bet.
And maybe I should back up a little bit and talk about the reporting program.
Yeah, please, because it would be great in case I ever go up there and I see something. I want to kind of know. Yeah, what? First of all, why did you start this reporting? I mean, because I'm surprised there hasn't been one before.
Yeah. So the story all started. My mother-in-law, she had a number of businesses here in the gorge. My wife and I were living up in Seattle, and about 3 years ago, she passed away. And my wife and I made the decision that we would come down and take on the family businesses and, run some of her stores. Well, one of the stores, you had mentioned earlier, I've got a pretty significant outdoor adventure background. I was a soldier and a wildland forest firefighter and a search and rescue EMT. And so we converted one of those stores to be an outdoor store. So it, selling outdoor gear and equipment, adventure stuff.
Right.
And right after we did that, people started coming in spontaneously and telling us these really incredible stories of their encounters with Sasquatch and with UFOs. I was fascinated by this. I've had a number of unusual encounters in my life, and I know that oftentimes there can be a kernel of truth to these kinds of stories. And so I decided to put up a big sign on the window, and it read, file paranormal reports here. And we invited people to come in. I gave special instructions to the staff. I told them, if people come in with an unusual story, I want you to take them seriously.
Right.
I want you to ask intelligent follow-up questions. I don't want you to impose what you think they saw on their experience. Let's just take in the information and see what there is to see. I wanted this store to be a safe place where you could tell your story and not be judged. And that turned out to be a very effective strategy. And so, like I said, now we've had close to 250 reports and a whole range of amazing things. For me, it has been a complete joy. I mean, imagine owning a store and 2 or 3 times a week, a new Scooby-Doo mystery walks in, and you get to, talk with these people, and it's incredibly rewarding. Being in the business that you've been in, I'm sure you know that a lot of times people will have a strange experience, and they'll keep it inside of themselves for a long time.
Oh, for a long time.
To be able to have a conversation about it, try to figure out what it is with people who are taking you seriously and aren't, giggling nervously or whatever, can mean a lot to a person. Mm-hmm. And I kind of took the position, well, it's true that someone could come in and, tell a tall tale. And I thought, well, there's really no harm in that. It's not like I've got an academic reputation to maintain or anything. But let's see what happens if we take people at their word and try to see the truth and look for patterns between the stories. I was amazed at how few people, I mean, there may have been 3 or 4 people coming in, obviously joking around, but
Right.
pretty much everyone is relatively serious and is really thankful that they have a place to talk about things.
Well, out of over 200, you can now start to, it's kind of like a DNA with, on ancestry.com. The more people give their DNA samples, the more that you can kind of determine, who's related, where people are from. With over 200, I mean, yeah, it's not millions, but it's enough to say, oh, these stories are very similar. Okay, I saw a UFO flying in the sky, but what are some of the ones that are more specific of like, wait a minute, this story is like Bob down the street and Mildred. What are some of those stories that you recognize there's a very similarity to each other?
Obviously, there's a number of Sasquatch stories. We've had people bring in hair samples and have a number of descriptions. I'm kind of in the camp now that I believe that the Sasquatch experiences people are having here seem to be some type of melding of a creature that has got a physical presence here in the world sometimes, and may have an extra dimensional. This may not be their native realm. Right. Is one of the things that seems to be what the reports are indicating. There are some people. There's one guy who the Sasquatch apparently there's sort of like a travel pinch point for him on his property, and so he has had dozens of scores of sightings, and he's brought in hair samples and discussed it a number of times. And in his mind, I asked him one day point blank, I said, so do you think that this is an animal, a biological animal, or do you think it's something interdimensional or something else? He said, oh, it's definitely a biological animal. But I will tell you, they seem to have the ability to do limited teleportation. And I thought, not sure that's any animal that I know, or that's, recorded in the scientific literature as being able to do that. And so...
Oh, yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah, so that's, like I said, one of those kind of things where the preponderance of evidence is leading me to that kind of a conclusion there.
No, yeah, perfect. And the more I've been doing this show for a long time, and the people I've talked to about Bigfoots and UFOs, and then now interdimensional travel, I'm starting to believe that more and more, that they are these portals that some of these Sasquatch or Bigfoot or Yeti, whatever you want to call it, are using, because it would explain not finding whole tribes and nests. I mean, maybe there might be nests. I've heard of nests before, but and being able to disappear without pretty much a trace. And we were talking earlier, for the people that just tuned in, this is James Szubski, and we were talking about how this big lava flow, how many millions of years ago?
It was 15 to 12 million years ago. It erupted a number of times over that time period.
So, there's been some lot of energy flowing in this part of the country. So, it would explain how some of these portals to another dimension could be effective. Is your thoughts of interdimensional travel kind of a theory that could be proven eventually?
There is a deceased scientist named Dr. Michael Persinger. He was in Ontario at Laurentide University, and he did a lot of studies with what magnetic manipulating magnetic fields around the brain, what happens. He created this helmet with solenoids on it, and through subtly manipulating not the strength of the magnetic fields, but the complexity of the magnetic fields, he was able to induce a number of perceptions. And so very commonly he could produce a sensed presence, so the sense that something else was near you. With 3 or 4 of his subjects, they actually claimed to have seen God. And so this device was became known as the God helmet. And in the 80s, it was very famous. Wired magazine did articles on it. A bunch of different people did articles on it. He's a top-notch scientist, peer-reviewed. His credentials are unimpeachable. But what he discovered was that through subtly manipulating these fields, there's a number of different perceptual changes that people will go through or will experience, and they will experience them consistently. For instance, he's able to turn on and off the sensation of terror, fear. And so what's interesting, you were talking about like, what are some of the patterns that we've seen? Well, about probably 4 miles west of the store. Yeah, there's the God helmet on the screen now. There's a mountain called Underwood Mountain. And in March of this year, I received a photograph of what looks very much like a Tic Tac type UFO right over the summit of Underwood Mountain. Underwood Mountain's probably 2,500 feet tall. And, it was taken from 12 miles away. And so we did some image analysis on it. No wings or rotors on this thing. Looks a lot like what you see from the gun cameras of the Navy fighter jets. Right. So interesting data point. In my mind, inconclusive. Not a lot of pixels to deal with in that particular shot. Well, a few years ago, before we really got our paranormal reporting up and running, I had taken a picture sort of at the base of Underwood Mountain. And there was this really interesting beam of light coming down out of the sky, and I was taking pictures of it. And then as I was looking at the pictures afterwards, there is a blue glowing orb that appears in one of the pictures. And so obviously lens flares are a thing that happens, and they can, people can get excited about a lens flare. But this one is different. A lens flare, and I have pictures with lens flares from the same camera. They're typically perfectly circular. They don't have any information in them or film grain in them. They're monochromatic, and so this particular one has a textured, interior. Right. It's not a perfectly colored circle. It's got film grain in it, and I know it's not fake because I took the picture myself. And so this is happening directly below where that UFO was shot. And then we've received reports of people who live on Underwood Mountain. There are a number of vineyards up there. And a gentleman said that he had seen 2 red glowing orbs sort of leapfrogging each other and sort of, for lack of a better word, dancing in the sky above his fields. They descended into his fields, and then they turned into red glowing eyes, and they began to approach him. And then he said, like a switch was turned, the feeling of terror entered my mind. And so he ran into his home to get a shotgun, and by the time he came out, the phenomenon was over. Now, the interesting thing to me about this is that his report of how that fear manifested for him, it wasn't like the terror built based on the things that he was seeing. It was like, nope, there was a switch that was thrown, and suddenly I was experiencing terror. This is exactly the types of things that Dr. Michael Persinger was describing and his subjects were perceiving in his work. And so this is why I have a very strong belief that it's the electromagnetic environment that is having an impact on why we have so many reports out here. Now, on the one hand, you could say, well, this sounds like it may be a hallucinatory experience, right? Like if it's impacting his brain in that way, then it's a personalized experience. Something was going on electrochemically or whatever in his own brain, and it's sort of some type of weird artifact of neural activity. But the fact that we have 2 photographs of an orb and then what looks like a Tic Tac UFO, hallucinations you can't take pictures of. And so this is why the only theory that seems to make sense to me is, rather than hallucinating, what's happening with this manipulation of magnetic fields around people's brains is that, so we can all understand that human perception is a narrow band. like we know that we don't see infrared light or ultraviolet light. We know there are sounds that dogs can hear that we can't hear, right? And so, and plus there's a whole bunch of social constructs that we have about, what things are when we look at them. So basically we've got a pretty narrow band of perception. And what I think is happening is that your perceptive tuning is shifted under certain electromagnetic conditions, and you're able to perceive things that you don't normally perceive but are always present. So think about like a radio station. You can be listening to classical music, and then with a slight manipulation of the dial, slight manipulation of the receiving apparatus, you're then able to pick up rock and roll or talk radio or whatever else. Completely different information that you were receiving a second ago.
Yeah.
It was always present. It's just that you weren't tuned to it. And I think between this crazy, complicated, nuanced electromagnetic environment, things that may be going on with the solar magnetic wind and how that's impacting the Earth's magnetosphere, maybe even what you ate that day, like did you eat more potassium that day or whatever it is. Those things in combination, and more specifically, because this place is so electromagnetically unique. In fact, it's not just my theory that it is. When you look at the NOAA navigation maps of the gorge, there are bright pink letters on them that say, warning, your compass readings will be off in this area. So it is absolutely, scientifically verified that, we have strange magnetic forces going on here. And so when you look at the data there, the only logical conclusion is that it isn't a phenomenon secluded or exclusive to one individual's brain, because we've got physical evidence. And we also have situations where there are multiple witnesses reporting the same thing. I had a whitewater rafting tour guide, a leader, just up maybe 15 minutes from the store up the White Salmon River. And her and 6 of her other guides saw a UFO in the sky, egg-shaped UFO in the sky for 40 minutes. And so all of them, 6 different individuals having the same experience, you can't really chalk that up to, some type of brain artifact.
No, yeah, for sure. And I think, again, the more one witnesses with other people, it kind of gives more of a validation of not just someone maybe had a few too many drinks or why I know we talked about the energy, but is there a certain type of time of year or that sightings are seen most? Is Bigfoot more in the spring? Is UFOs more in the summer? Are there any types of years, or is it pretty much just throughout the year itself?
I haven't noticed any patterns, and it's actually would be an interesting. I could go back through our reports and kind of see, how that plays out.
Right.
So the way that we get reports is people will come into the store. We have reporting forms that they can fill out. But a lot of times folks just want to, verbally tell us their story. We get a lot of reports on our Facebook page. Occasionally, I'll put up a post about, oh, here's a potential UFO sighting, and then the community will respond. Or
right.
And then recently, our website we've updated so that you can file paranormal reports on our website. But it's gotten to the point, so the gorge, like I said, is 80 miles long. There's maybe
it's huge.
I don't know, 8 to 10 villages. The biggest town is the Dalles in Oregon. It's got not even 20,000 people. Like the town that I live in, Stevenson's got 1,500. And so it's a pretty small community. Probably a total of 80,000 people live here. And it's gotten to the point where I'm pretty well known.
I'm stuff. Sure, yeah.
And so what's really fun is I'll be at the grocery store and someone will stop me and we'll spend half an hour talking about their Sasquatch experience, or I'll be at the post office and I'll get another story, or, I'll be stopped at a restaurant. And I love it every time. I mean, to me, it's a a real joy to share these exotic experiences and to hear people's reports and how it's affecting them, and some people are surprised to realize that they had an encounter. Like I said, to me right now, I'm super fascinated by this big black cat, and a lot of times people say, "Oh, see, obviously we have cougars out here, right?" And
we're not talking about older women for younger men. We're talking about.
Nope, we're not talking about them.
Yeah.
But cougars, according to the wildlife specialists that I've talked to, there's never supposed to be a black cougar. When cougars express their melanin, they go from being tan to a reddish color. And so that's one thing that's like, okay, well, there aren't supposed to be black cougars. The size is obviously an issue. Being bigger than a tiger in some of these reports, it can't really be, that's a mismatch there. Cougars are also incredibly afraid of humans, and they're known to abandon fresh kills just at the sound of human voices. And we've had many, many reports of this creature. The very first report that we got, the guy had encountered it for close to 5 minutes, and other times it will approach people. Thank God there have been no hostile encounters, which is another interesting artifact of some of these reports. And then of course this monkey-like face, that one has thrown me for a loop. Like, I will get a report and I won't hear about the monkey-like face for a while, and I'll just start to think, maybe it was a trick of light or the way that, reporting error or something. And then another credible witness will come, a woman who was a crew chief on a firefighting team between St. Helens and Mount Adams. They were dropped off for a 3-day deployment, and the whole crew saw it on the first night, and they were wondering what the heck they were going to do if it showed up in camp. Her description was a little more helpful. She said that it had a flattened face. So, like, if you imagine the difference between like a German Shepherd and a pug dog, both dogs, one just got a more flattened face, and so you could understand how someone might think that looks more ape-like, especially with fur on it or something. But as I researched that more deeply, there is a Native American story, tradition about a race of supernatural panther protectors that come from an underwater realm. And I'm sure you and your listeners are aware, when you hear Native American stories about things that are from the sky realm or the earth realm or underwater realm, we're talking about creatures that seem to have 1 foot in the physical realm and 1 foot in the spirit realm. And what really caught my attention about these creatures, called the Meshepeshu, is that the description is they look like a black panther with the face of a man. And when you look at that petroglyph that we were looking at earlier from Horse Thief Butte, that very much looks like a cat-like face with wavy water lines under its head. Now, I had an encounter out near Horse Thief Lake. So I was exploring Horse Thief Butte, and there's a place where the canyon sort of opens up and you can see down into Horse Thief Lake. It's probably about 600 or 700 yards away. It was at dusk, so the sun was setting, and I could see a large creature swimming in the middle of the lake. There were ducks on the lake, so I could kind of gauge its size, but it was too far away to get any real details. And again, this was before we were receiving a lot of paranormal reports. And I saw this creature. It was obviously larger than a man, but I would say smaller than a car, so somewhere in that range. And it would patrol sort of the center of the lake, swimming in circles and different patterns. It would submerge for up to 5 minutes, and then it would come back to the surface. And I was looking at it, like, what in the heck is that? There's a short list of creatures that are that big. We've got black bear out here. Black bear are typically going to be a point-to-point swimmer. They're not going to spend time, circling the center, and they're definitely not going to submerge. Elk would follow those same kind of characteristics. There are sturgeon in the river here, so those are fish that can grow to be 12 feet long.
Wow.
But they wouldn't spend time on the surface. And and they're typically a lighter color. And so at the time, I just chalked it up to, I do not know what the heck that thing was. And what was interesting is that we started getting these reports of the cat, the Klickitat Ape Cat. And, only in retrospect did I think, oh, well, it may have been, one of these cats. What's even stranger about that experience is that if you took where I was sitting in Horse Thief Butte, you drew a line through the cat, it would extend directly to that petroglyph on the wall on the other side of Horse Thief Lake. And so again, I don't know what to make of that. Could be just coincidence. I wasn't close enough to have a verified sighting, but we have had other reports of the cat swimming and in the Columbia River. And so pretty fascinating stuff.
That is amazing. That is amazing. I know we're going to talk before we end about, how people can come up and visit and maybe stop by your store. But we were talking before we were on air, and I have to say I'm a big fan of, most people are, of Stranger Things. And you said you kind of have a Stranger Thing themed encounters up in your area. Can you go ahead and tell us that story? That's very fascinating.
Sure. So just on a broad level, we have a number of folks have reported, that they've been stopped by soldiers while they were hiking, or we've had certain areas that have been closed by the government. There are reports that near Mount Adams, there is some type of secret government base. Those things are all interesting. And again, from my perspective, these are reports that we're receiving. I have no reason to not believe them, but I don't have any evidence to suggest that, or I haven't seen it myself, so I can't vouch for it. But as I was researching this cat, this is the thing that has been fascinating me. We have up river from us, a very important Department of Energy site called the Hanford Nuclear Site. So this first started during World War II. So of course, everyone knows about the Manhattan Project. The Allies were terrified that the Nazis were going to unlock the secret of the atom before we did. And so they launched the Manhattan Project. Famously, Dr. Oppenheimer is down in Los Alamos with his team of physicists, and they're designing the bomb. But up in Washington State, at a location just along the Columbia River, the government knew that they needed to build industrial scale nuclear reactors to forge the plutonium that would be used in the weapons. And so they created the Hanford Nuclear Site. Now, Hanford is 600 square miles, and the government came in and they evicted everyone who was living on the property, including the Native Americans. This was like an ancient sacred ground for them along the Columbia River. They're all evicted, and they start in secret building this, what turns out to be over a $100 billion facility in today's dollars, to create, there you can see it on the, to start building these reactors. Well, so everyone knows the Nazis were interested in the bomb, but the Nazis were also hyper focused on creating super animals and super soldiers. They had actually brought back an extinct Ice Age creature called the aurochs. It's a giant hyper aggressive bull, and through retrobreeding and other crazy Nazi things, they actually brought it back to life and populated a forest in Poland with these things. And so back in the 40s, everyone knew that radiation could induce mutations, but we didn't know much more about that. It was still pretty virgin territory in terms of the science on how all that worked. And so from day one, Hanford had an animal testing program. And the guy that they selected to run that program was a professor from the University of Washington named Dr. Lauren Donaldson. And Dr. Lauren Donaldson's only academic achievement before being picked to run this animal testing lab was that he had created a super animal. It's a creature that's still alive today. It's called the Donaldson super trout. And this is an animal that is 8 times larger than a normal trout, 8 times stronger. It reaches sexual maturity in half the time. It can swim in salt water and fresh water, and it's super survivable. And so he's the guy that they have running this animal testing program. at Hanford from the very beginning. Well, we win the war. The plutonium from Hanford was used in the Trinity test, so the very first nuclear weapon ever detonated by mankind, and also in the bomb dropped in Nagasaki. So they make Hanford public, and then immediately the Cold War kicks off. And the Russians start scooping up Nazi scientists, and then we start scooping up Nazi scientists through the Operation Paperclip. Eventually, Donaldson winds up going to the South Pacific, and he's involved in like Bikini Atoll and the disastrous Castle Bravo tests and all that whole crazy South Pacific stuff that gave rise to the Godzilla mythology. So he leaves Hanford, and a new guy comes in whose name is Bill Bear. And so they stay in contact with each other. And during the Cold War, Bill Bear is in charge of this animal testing lab, and it grows to be able to house 1,000 large animals at a time. Like, it is a massive facility. I've seen in like 1960s propaganda films, they call it the Atomic Zoo. And so on the surface, they say that they're testing to see like what happens if a cow gets irradiated, can you still drink its milk, or how much radiation can sheep eat before they become non-viable food sources.
Right.
But so Hanford eventually had 9 full-scale nuclear reactors running at a time. They called it the Apocalypse Forge because it created enough plutonium to fuel 60,000 nuclear weapons.
Wow.
Well, the Cold War ends in like the late 80s, right? Like 1988 when the wall comes down.
Right.
And so they start to shut down Hanford, and then Bill Bear conducts a number of like oral history interviews. And so I got a hold of these, and I've been doing research, and I learned about this animal testing facility, and I listened to these interviews, and he talks about how they were doing radiation experiments on apex predators, and those predators escaped and they couldn't recapture them. And so it's a pretty remarkable story. And the stories that he tells, they had 30 alligators, approximately 30 alligators, and they were irradiating them. He even holds up a picture of the device they used to irradiate these the alligators with alligators in it. And he goes on to describe how one night 6 of these experimental apex predators outsmarted the scientists and escaped their pens and got into the Columbia River. And there is concurrent historical documentation, newspaper articles and stuff like that corroborate this story. And in fact, he tells the story in all 3 of his interviews. Well, these animals get into the Columbia River. They have this covert army hunting team. And from July to January, this army hunting team tries to locate and kill these gators. Well, January gets around, and they have only captured 4 of the 6. And Bill Bear says he thinks that, they probably won't live. It's getting too cold. But you have to understand, like, the reason why Hanford is on the Columbia River is because it's taking in water to cool the reactors, and then that hot water is coming out. And so, the Columbia River is staying incredibly warm. Well, in these interviews, Bill Bear talks about how even well into the 80s, he was getting calls from fish and wildlife guys asking him if he knew anything about alligators in the Columbia River, and he would just tell them no and hang up on him. And in the interview, he kind of laughs about it like it's a funny thing. So pretty crazy that we've got this full-fledged Department of Energy lab doing experiments in apex predators. And you have to ask yourself, well, why would they be experimenting on alligators? Like, it makes sense that they might be experimenting on, livestock, things like that.
Right. Yeah, that wouldn't make sense.
But why apex predators? Well, before we can talk about how that has anything to do with cats, we have to talk a little bit about dolphins. So since 1958, the U.S. government has used dolphins to guard our top most sensitive nuclear sites. In fact, at a time, dolphins were guarding 1/4 of the U.S. nuclear stockpile. And the reason why they're doing this is because, like up in Washington State, we've got this Bangor subbase on the Olympic Peninsula. If Washington were its own country, it would be the third largest nuclear power in the world because of all the nuclear weapons up there. Well, if you've got a Soviet scuba diver coming in to surveil or sabotage your facility, sonar can't tell the difference between that diver and a sea lion or a tuna or some other kind of marine life. And so they realized that they could train these highly intelligent dolphins to identify the divers. What they would do is they'd take this sort of harpoon-like dart, a barbed dart, and they'd place it on the snout of the dolphin, and they'd train the dolphin to ram into that diver, and that barb would get stuck in their flesh. A balloon would inflate, and it would bring the diver to the surface, and the Navy would scoop him up. Because a dead diver at the bottom of the ocean gives you no information. You always want to know what's going on. And so we know for certain that the U.S. government and the Department of Energy are definitely using animals as sentries. In fact, Hanford had 4 Nike missile launch sites. So Nike missiles are surface-to-air nuclear-tipped anti-aircraft weapons.
Right.
The idea being it would be better to detonate a nuclear weapon over U.S. civilian populations than to allow Soviet bombers to take out Hanford. Like, that's how important it was. But every one of those Nike missile launch sites were guarded by dogs. And when you look at the historical documentation, they say we're doing this because 1 dog equals 10 soldiers. Like, 1 dog is a better sentry than 10 men. So you get to Hanford. Hanford's got 90 miles of river coastline that they need to guard.
That's a lot to cover.
And how the heck are you going to do that?
Yeah.
You can't bring dolphins in there because dolphins only operate in saltwater. And obviously the Columbia River is freshwater. So you might try alligators, right? But you would ask yourself a really simple question. What is the world's best riverine hunter? What animal hunts best in rivers? Well, that animal turns out to be a black jaguar. So jaguars can hold their breath for 15 minutes. They can swim a kilometer in the open ocean. They can eat underwater. They can kill alligators with a single bite to the back of the head. They have night vision that's 6 times better than a human being. And they always instinctively drag their prey to shore. So if you're looking for a base animal to create a sentry creature from, black jaguar is absolutely going to be at the top of your list. There's no, why wouldn't you do that? So what, if you don't want to evoke some type of supernatural explanation for why there are giant black panthers running around Klickitat County, you can look to Hanford and you can say, well, we know for a fact that the U.S. government is using animals as sentries, 100%, no question about it. We know for a fact that they were experimenting in apex predators at Hanford. We know that they couldn't contain those predators. And we know that once those predators escaped, they were unable to recapture them all. So if you look at where Hanford is located, if you go north, east, or south of Hanford, you just go deeper into the desert. If you go west into Klickitat County, you find all this available habitat. There's all kinds of forests and available cover. There's lots of prey. And so one of the leading theories as to why we've got these enormous
so you have an animal for each environment.
Yeah, is that they were running experiments at Hanford. They escaped, and they couldn't recapture them.
Wow. Well, do you want to take you want to go on a field trip, and we can go like at 3:00 in the morning, and you go first though.
Another interesting thing that sort of fits in with that theory is that these cats that have been reported seem to be unafraid of humans, but we don't have any hostile reports. And so if you did have a sentinel creature, it wouldn't instantly attack humans. In fact, you'd want it to be only attacking on command, right? Like you can't have your handlers be endangered. And so it's a pretty interesting story. Again, we are trying to make sense. Jaguars do live in North America, but their range is 1,000 miles south of Klickitat County. And so again, unless there's stories of, in fact, that Isetti Ranch up south of Mount Adams claimed to be in contact with a number of different races of extraterrestrial intelligences. And one of the main races they claim to be in contact with is a race of feline humanoids. In fact, there's a cat head on their logo because it's such an important race to them. And when you look at where many of the sightings have occurred, they're on the rivers that flow off of the glaciers of Mount Adams. Again, for me, part of the joy of this whole thing is, trying to figure out what's going on here. It's a really fun exercise, and each new story that comes in, we have had one guy came in and told me that he saw the big black cat in his driveway, but it had a cub with it. So it had a youngling with it. And we know that, even like tigers never live to be more than 15 years old. Some of these stories go back to 1968. And so, there
must be enough.
Have some type of reproducing population.
Yeah.
And again, to me, it's just, I love that this is a place where there are still mysteries, that there are.
Well, it sounds like up there, there's a
questions. Lot. And it's just, it's been a remarkable and incredibly enjoyable experience.
I would say so. And definitely, like I said, I need to come up and visit. And for people that do want to come up and visit, not just to enjoy the beauty, but also hope to experience some type of paranormal activity, can they stop in the store and ask, or how do people prepare for if they want some type of paranormal activity? There's never a guarantee, but what do they need to look for or prepare for?
Well, my store is located in Bingen, Washington, which is right across the river from Hood River, Oregon. So Hood River is a pretty famous place. It's the windsurfing capital of the world. And so Hood River's got a lot of great restaurants and hotels. Bingen has got a couple of hotels and some of my favorite restaurants, but we've got a population of 800 people in Bingen. And wow. So it's a kind of a smaller town. But the store, we've won awards. We were voted the best outdoor outfitter, the best gift store, and the best attraction in the gorge. We've got a big map up on the wall. This map behind me, I drew myself.
Oh, wow.
I'm kind of a huge Dungeons and Dragons nerd, always have been. And so when I started to realize that we've got this incredible adventure area, I illustrated this map, and this map has locations of many of the sightings. So this is up on the wall. It's 6 feet long and 3 feet tall. We've got a number of I've developed these like self-guided tours to some of the hotspots. They're called arcane adventure maps, and one is of Horse Thief Butte. Another one is of Beacon Rock, which is this stunningly beautiful cold core of a ancient volcano. It's 840 feet tall.
Wow. And
there's actually a trail pinned to the cliffside, and you can hike to the top of it. But we've had reports of ghostly apparitions. So the maintenance crew there, many of them have reported ghostly apparitions at the trailheads. Lots of reports of glowing orbs out there. Very unusual area. And so those are some of the ways that, I'm trying to find ways for people to get engaged with this stuff and give them some clues and some tips on how to find it. But the thing about the gorge is that, so this river has been flowing for anywhere between 35 to 20 to 35 million years.
Wow. And
so the flow of energy coming through here is such an established and powerful momentum to it, and you could look at that in sort of a woo-woo way, like if you just calm your mind and be near the river, like you can feel that energy. But in very weird ways, there are, for instance, 14 hydroelectric dams on the Columbia River. They generate 44% of all the hydropower in the United States. And so quite literally, this power, the energy of the river, is being captured and converted into an energy that we understand and utilize on a daily basis. And it's transformed our world.
Yeah.
And, like you look back to 1750, electricity was the thing of sorcery. And you had a guy like Benjamin Franklin standing out in his yard during a lightning storm, flying a kite. I mean, his neighbors must have thought he was a complete whack job, right? Right. Like, that's insane.
I mean, if I saw that today, I'd probably feel the same if somebody was.
Yeah. But it's because here's a citizen scientist who's curious about the world and is going to explore these things and try to understand what's going on. And when you think about the paranormal creatures, like impossible beings, Sasquatch, ape cats,
right?
You name it. Like from the very earliest records of human thought. So I'm talking about cave paintings in Chavaux or Lascaux, France, or they're all depicting impossible creatures, therianthropes, so human animal hybrids, or chimeras, so animals with combination parts. Seeing these types of beings is as old as human records go. Like, it has been a part of humanity on every continent where people have lived, in every era of time. In some eras, like during ancient Egypt, the best and the brightest were talking about it. It's the pharaohs that are putting these images on their walls, these human animal hybrids. Even look at like traditional native groups, their shaman are encountering these creatures which should be impossible. And so to hand wave away these things are hallucinations or figments or not real is really an incredible disservice to the data. I mean, like, when you look at the human experience is intimately involved with these things, and to ignore them or to say that there's no meaning to them is kind of chickening out. It means that your model of the universe can't contain the complete human experience. So there's a failure in your model, not a failure in the observation.
I totally agree with you, and I think we're going to have a part 2. You are a wealth of knowledge. I mean, I thought we were just going to talk about a few things. Your nuclear, sites and all kinds of different things that I'm like, this guy is one smart cookie, as they say. So please, I'd love to have you back. Unfortunately, our time's up, but hopefully you'll come back and be a
we'll have to talk
2.
about portals. I really want to tell you about this place that I'm really excited about. It's sort of up here behind my shoulder, on this side of my head. There's sort of this grayish area on the map. It's a place we call Broke Leg Barrows. It is an 8,000-year-old lava flow that is the size of Manhattan, and cell phones don't work there, compasses don't work there. My drone can't pick up a GPS signal there, but it is this crazy environment where there are micro canyons and caves.
Oh, wow.
And we've had people go missing there. I was there just earlier this week, and I'm an extremely accomplished land navigator. I was trained by the military, trained by Search and Rescue.
Right.
I have a really good innate directional sense. And it turned me around in a place, in a way that I have never been confused in the wilderness like this. And I thought, oh my God. And it was even a temporal anomaly, so a loss of time, and a spatial anomaly where I was different from where I should have been. And so that's a place that is to me, my most favorite mystery I'm working on right now is what the heck is going on in Broke Leg Barrows. So,
well, definitely, I'm coming up. You're going to hopefully take me, and we can do some studies and see if some amazing things can happen. But thank you, James, for being on the show. I really appreciate it.
If people want to check us out, margiesoutdoorstore.com. We put stuff up on Facebook occasionally, stuff on Instagram. So Margie's Outdoor Store is the digital signature to look for.
Perfect. And if you guys happen to be up there and have an encounter, please go and report it on their website or in the store. That's a must do. But thank you, James, and thank you for doing the research and being part of the paranormal world, and that bring us these researches that most of us don't get to go and do on a daily or even a yearly basis. So thank you. Thank you so much.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me, Tony.
All right, everybody. Well, thank you so much for being part of Truth Be Told. Once again, we brought you some amazing guests, and I hope you guys support James and go to margieoutdoor.com. And please support Truth Be Told by sharing, leaving comments, liking the show, telling your friends. It always helps us continue to bring you over 850 episodes. We're wanting to get to 1,000, so make sure you guys keep supporting us. Listen to Bonnie Burkett on Wednesdays with Truth Be Told Transformation. You know, she brings you the spirituality, the gurus, the meditation side of Truth Be Told. Robert Hensley does Minutemen Report on Mondays. It's all at 3 o'clock. And, of course, me every Friday right here that I've been sitting in this chair for all these years. This week, this is my 15th year of doing a podcast. 15 years.
15. That's amazing.
Take that. I appreciate that, James. I just feel like a teenager, so not. But until next time, everybody, I appreciate you. Love you guys. And thank you for being part of our journey. Take care. Bye. This has been another episode of Truth Be Told. Thank you so much for watching. Recorded live at UBN Go Studios in Burbank, California. Join us on social media. Facebook, Truth Be Told Radio. Instagram, Truth Be Told Paranormal. Go to Truth Be Told Worldwide for more information on upcoming shows.